Okay, welcome folks to the Abundance Workshop. This is a request that came in from one of you. And like I said, I'm fielding requests for topics. I took off a week last weekend because we had the July 4th weekend, and it's a time when most people are traveling. And I encourage you to get out and do things and be out in nature and so on. So I did not want to have the session right in the middle of this long weekend. So we took a little break and we're back. We're back with creating abundance. And I want to start off today's session with a quick story. The story goes that there was a beautiful tourist beach and there was some people walking around, and there was this one boat that was kind of tucked away into the sand. It was kind of away from the waves. And there was this guy, the fisherman, sleeping on this boat. And just imagine this beautiful sunset. They've got this boat on the beach and this man sleeping on it. And behind him is this beautiful ocean and the waves and the birds and so on and so forth. And so a tourist walks by, then looks at this idyllic scene and he's like, okay, I got to take a picture of this thing. So he goes close to the boat and he takes a picture with his camera. And with the flash of the camera and the sound of the shutter, it wakes up the fisherman. So the fisherman is kind of startled a little bit and he looks at this tourist. The tourist looks at him and says, listen, I got to talk to you. And he goes and kind of settles down next to him on the boat. And he says, why are you sleeping? The fisherman says, because I worked in the morning. I've worked for a couple of hours. I got some fish and I decided I'm going to take the afternoon off. He says, listen, do you realize how much potential you have? He says, if you went out and actually fished like maybe 3 sessions, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, you could catch 3 times the amount of fish. And then the fisherman looks at him and says, so what would that do? He said, what do you mean, what would that do? So you can, in a year, buy a much bigger fishing boat with a greater mechanized machine and engine and so on and so forth. And he says that, okay, what's that going to do? He says, you can get more fish, and the more fish means in 2 years, you can buy 2 or 3 boats. And maybe in 5 years, you can start owning trawlers and go deeper into the ocean, catch bigger fish, more fish, and so on. So what would that do? He says, again, a few years later, you can have a fleet of trawlers and you can have a helicopter that would go and do reconnaissance and actually see where the fish are and guide your trawlers to go into this area. And you can catch much more fish, and then you can build an empire. You can build containers, so you can build storage grounds, you can have freezers, you can have your own shipping fleet. Imagine you can do it with all the middlemen. And this time now, this fisherman's looking at it with his starry eyes and he says, then what would that do? He said, what do you mean, what would that do? That would mean that you can buy a beautiful place, you can stay on the beach, you can rest, you can relax, you can have a beautiful nap, and you can watch the sunset. And the fisherman says to him, wait, but isn't that what I was doing until you walked up here? So ask ourselves this question. In the story, there are two opposing ideas. One is this philosophy of doing more, or this thing called the utopia of influence. And the other philosophy is of contentment, or doing less, and the utopia of liberation. So for the next 45 minutes or so, my entire conversation is in this dichotomy of these two forces, right? So in the utopia of affluence that says more is better, versus the utopia of liberation, which means I have enough. So I want you to think about this thing. So there is this thing about doing more, action-orientedness, getting more, being more productive. But what you don't realize, or many people haven't realized, that within this philosophy of doing more and achieving more, with the intention that that's actually going to buy you more time, there are certain traps that you do not realize until you get to that point, until you get to the pitfall. And I'm going to discuss those 3 points here. So the first one is that the idea of doing more, harder, more efficient, is the hope that there will be time that gets generated, so that you get the liberation of time. And with that time, there is the hope that you'll have a better quality of life. Now, if you go back to the story of the fisherman and the tourist, how was the fisherman being suggested? What was he being prompted to do? What was he being urged to do? He was urged to go ahead and work harder so he could go generate more assets, which would become more efficient, so he can be able to be more productive, quote unquote, so that he become more wealthy. Now, with the acquisition of stuff, which is what one of the three fundamental pillars of modern day living. One of the pillars of modern day living is the acquisition. We live to collect stuff and fill our houses with stuff. Keep in mind, with that comes the responsibility to maintain it and keep it safe, right? So the more stuff you acquire, more time that you get spared, so to speak, from your efficiency is actually being secretly or covertly being diverted into, without you being actually aware of it, into the upkeep of that stuff that you're acquiring. And the headache of putting cameras, putting security, putting alarm systems, keeping thieves at bay, that people who, in the fear of that, somebody else may want your stuff, right? So in the trap number 2, there is the hope that this philosophy of progress makes you more reliant on the technology. So we're becoming actually servants of technology. Instead of technology actually serving us, we become servants of technology. And how does that happen? So there's actually a guy called Wolfgang Sachs who's researched this and says one of the technological innovations that has supposedly been one of the greatest liberators of our time, making us much more efficient as a human race, is the invention of the car. Okay, so a car is supposed to be able to give you the freedom to be able to go from point A to point B at a much faster speed, making you much more potentially efficient. Now, what has in turn ended up happening is that the human being does not just now, because he has a car, go from point A to point B, but because of this freedom, seeks to go thousands of kilometers more. That has become now have the availability, accessibility to be able to travel, to be able to do things and see things. And as a consequence of that, a human being, an average human being in Europe, or average person in Germany specifically, used to travel about 2,000 kilometers in a year in 1950. Fast forward to today, an average German travels approximately 15,000 kilometers. So ask yourself, if there is that efficiency which was intended to actually free up my time, is it actually sucking me into becoming a slave of this new tool, toy, whatever it is? And I'm giving example of the car, but think of anything: television, video games, anything, any other technological hobby or a little gift that you've been given. How much that actually it sucks you into this. And now that brings us to my third trap, that these technologies actually that supposedly make us more efficient and give us the liberation of time to be able to go live life are actually making us lazy. We human beings from 1950 to now are move less, stand less, carry less, right? So physically, we are basically becoming fatter, obese. We are becoming more susceptible to diabetes and everything that comes with putting on weight. And so the chances of us actually dying of starvation are far less than is actually dying of eating too much this day and age. So my proposition is, for all of these three traps, one needs to actually take time to slow down and observe, because if you don't take time to observe, you're not going to catch yourself going down this rat hole, any one of these rat holes, or multiple of these rat holes. And the unfortunate thing is, I often use in many of my workshops this example of the carousel. Okay, so what happens? What's a carousel? Carousel is what your luggage comes out when you land in a plane in an airport. Your luggage comes through a carousel. So think about what a carousel does. The carousel is a belt It's a long conveyor belt that has this winding path that somewhere luggage gets put on it. And then the luggage passes, it's like a kind of a display in front of all of the passengers. And then nobody collects it, then it goes and gets spitted out at the end somewhere, it gets dropped off for somebody to claim later on. So life, I say, is like a carousel. And what I mean by that is that we get put onto this conveyor belt at birth. All right, our parents give birth to us. And then what happens is, in this busyness of life, as parents, and life is going, as society is becoming more and more occupied and more engaged with multiple careers, husband and wife having careers, and God forbid, multiple careers even for a single person, we don't have time for family. So this child who's born is then get put into the conveyor belt of society. So whether you call it daycare, whether you call it nannies, whether you call it play school, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then if you think about how the conveyor belt, it actually moves from one leaf to the next. It basically gets passed on from one leaf to the next as the conveyor belt is moving. So what does that leaf relate to in our analogy? It's different systems, right? We've got different institutions that we get passed on. So we go through all of these different, like I said, the childcare systems, but then we get passed on to elementary school, that passes on to middle school, high school, college, I don't know if grad school is involved in that. And then so we keep moving, and we're expected to keep going from one leaf, keep racing from one to the next, never taking time to slow down. Because if you slow down, you're going to be left out. Why? Because the other baggage on this conveyor belt, so to speak, or the other people running our race alongside us, they're going to get ahead, and we don't want to let that happen. So what happens is we keep looking to the left and to the right and say, hey, as long as I'm able to keep up with my Joneses or my peers, or if I'm able to stay one step ahead of my peers, awesome, I'm winning this race. So then I don't compare, I don't really necessarily stop to check myself whether this is the race I was born to run, or this is the tree, as they say, I was born to climb. I have no idea. I keep running, I keep climbing this tree until at the end of that conveyor belt, I get spit out. What does that look like? Either it's a hospital bed or it's a bedroom in your house towards the far end of your life, and you're staring there, incapable of getting up and being able to go do and recreate your own story. You're staring at that ceiling and asking yourself, how much of that life did I live to my value system? How much of that journey did I walk that aligned with my purpose in life, versus me just kind of rushing through it, looking at here and there, left and right, at other people also running the race. And everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody's looking at each other and saying, you know what, as long as the whole herd is running this in this direction, I must be doing okay. But then there comes a point in time when you actually realize a lot of this is just peer pressure. It's marketing that is propelling you to do this. It's the systems of societies, what they're expecting of you. They want you to do their hopes and dreams living through you. And then it becomes too late to be able to rewind the clock and then walk this journey to one's own fulfillment, to your own purpose, to your own meaningful life, meaningful existence, according to your value systems. So it's very important, folks, that as we're getting busier, society is propelling us, all of these marketing machinery is telling us, go get this thing, go buy this thing. Life is not complete without this new gadget. And so what happens is, as we are in this pursuit of this stuff, in the so-called, what I call my utopia of affluence, we get into this cycle of the economy of it, where we are strapped to the mortgages, to the loans, to the bank balances, to the credit card debts. And then so we have to work harder, more efficient, putting out valuable time that we should be taking to self-care, for family, for loved ones, for our hobbies, for elevation, for our growth of the mindset, for wisdom. And instead, we're dedicating it 150% into this dream that at some point you realize is not even your dream. It has been put into you because you never questioned it. So take time to reflect on that. Take time to take pause and ask yourself, Is this what my life's meaning is? Is this how I want to see myself end of the day and say, I've lived to my fullest, I've lived to the best of my ability? So in order for you to do that, my experience, my life experience, and I know there's many, many people with multiple points of view on it, but from my perspective, I say that you will not be able to find your true north. Think of life as like, there's an inner compass inside you that is guiding you, that will tell you if you are willing to stop and look at it and say, what is your true north? And for you to be able to seek that guidance from within, you need to be able to stop both the hands and the heart. And when I say talk about hand and the heart slowing down, what I mean by is that you need to sit still. A lot of people would say, you know what, my meditation is my running. And it's great. And if that works for you, awesome, but not for me. I'm very athletic. As many of you know, I've multiple sports. I've been a sportsman since I was 13, won the national championship when I was in college and all this. I understand what it means to be moving and the necessary for exercise and so on and so forth. But there has to be a time when you are not just in the busyness of doing yet another thing in the guise of taking time for yourself. So I say your heart and your hands needs to slow down, and you need to sit in quiet contemplation and say, what is my value system? What is it that is my definition of success? And this is something that I do for kids, particularly with kids, because I often use this example. I say children are like rockets. We're all like rockets, actually, but children are like rockets that are on the earth, about to fly out, about to fire off into space. And a 1 degree error on the earth, you missed your moonshot by 1,000 miles. So I say that these tools that I'm going to be talking about today, and the ones that some of you have been practicing for some time, these contemplative tools that have come from ancient cultures for thousands of years, these are course correction tools. These are tools with which that degree error that we were talking about can be found, detected early on, and you can set yourself on the right course, such that you make your moonshot. And that, when I call it the moonshot, it is whatever it is your destination, whatever is your journey, whatever is that your definition of moon is. Because each one of our definitions of moon, our success is different. But seldom do universities, colleges, high schools, any sort of education system in our communities teach us these skills to refer to our inner compass. And I tell you, more than any wisdom that is sitting up in a temple and on top of a mountain in the Himalayas or in any book, is this wisdom that lies intrinsically within each one of us. Because remember, we are a product, whether you call about evolution or you believe in God's creation, however you look at it, we have within our DNA wisdom that has made us survive, has brought us to this point. And one needs to be able to access that. And for that, you need to slow down. There's no other way besides slowing down. So with that, I want to talk to you about a very powerful technique that a particular doctor in Hawaii, Dr. Hugh Len, he used this therapy, an ancient Hawaiian technique called Ho'oponopono. And with this technique, he was able to heal, he was able to remedy a ward full of prisoners who had extreme psychiatric conditions. So how did he go about that? He had this technique that he says that anything that you see as an illness out there is a reflection of something that is an illness within you. And if one takes time to examine the illness that I possess, and I take time to cleanse that, then I am actually liberating my environment of whatever that disease is. So taking a ward full of criminally insane patients without ever seeing them, only looking at their files, Dr. Hugh was able to heal these people, was able to remedy them of their disease, of their mental conditions. So The principle that it's a very ancient technique. He didn't invent it. It's the Ho'oponopono. It's a very ancient Hawaiian technique where the premise there is that you're looking for deep seated negative memories within the subconscious, examining them, and then ridding yourself of them to align with what would be freedom from your past and even freedom from worrying about the future. Now, what is the connection between Ho'oponopono and what I've talked about, this concept utopia of affluence and the utopia of liberation? Is because, you see, if you think about it, that intrinsic nature that makes us want to buy more, do more, get more, accumulate more, spend more, etc., comes from this intrinsic fear that I'm not enough. And we're not born that way, but we are conditioned when we let the society, when we grow up in looking at everybody around us, like I said, the marketing machinery, looking at our neighbors, comparing ourselves with this one and that one who's also running the race, no idea where this race is all ending up. There is this thing, this very subtle deposit in our subconscious that makes us feel we are not enough as we are. We will become better, we'll be more complete once we acquire that thing, that next mountain that's on the other side of the valley. And I read something really beautiful I want to share with you. So there was this magazine at the back of this magazine, there would be always a discourse of some wisdom, wise person from a different part of the world. And in this particular person, in this particular article, described where does actually that sense of contentment come? He says, contentment is not when we actually acquire something. We start working for our dream. We want to buy this boat. We want to buy that aeroplane. We want to buy this home and the swimming pool, this, that, and the other, or that beautiful gold necklace, whatever it is. It's not really the acquisition of that stuff that makes us content, that gives us that euphoria of feeling a sense of bliss. He says that bliss is very interestingly comes from, when there's this desire that gets created in your mind and then you work towards a desire, you achieve that object of your desire, and there is that gap between the time when your desire is fulfilled before the onset of the next desire. See, that state of not wanting anythingness, being completely contentedness, is where the experience of that bliss is. Think about that. There's a lot of wisdom tucked into that little statement there. It is that space of not wanting anythingness that leads into our state of being in bliss. So what if we actually tap into that, which is already there? We have it right now, right here. We have enough. We don't need to pursue other things, because I think all of you here at some point in life have realized it's not the acquisition of stuff that makes us complete. It's not that it makes us any actually better. It's a mind trap, like I've talked about many other traps today. So in today's exercise, what I'm going to do in this meditation, I'm going to teach you this Ho'oponopono, where it is a technique of how do you create the sense of contentment just by staying at peace with yourself and really deeply observing your subconscious mind when you have the offspring of these new desires, this new thing, and say, what am I sitting here and doing with this guy meditating? I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should be getting this. What about that task that I should be doing? No. You are perfectly fine being here right now. This is a gift that you're given for yourself. This is time to be here. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to go anywhere to do anything. Being here now is enough. Okay? So before we jump into that, as I always do, I want to do a little stretching exercise with you all. So here's what I want you to do. So take your hands, just like I'm doing, right? So palms facing each other. Make a little circle in front of you. So like I'm not putting it out straight. I'm making a little circle, if you can see this here with my hands. And stretch it out as far as you can. So using one hand that's facing with the palm facing outwards, Give it a little pressure, creating as big of a circle with your hands as you possibly can. Let the breathing continue nice and deep. If you want to close your eyes, you're welcome to do that. And with the next exhale, I want you to put your head into the circle. Almost as if you created a well in front of you, and you are with your head now looking down into the well, giving yourself a nice stretch, feeling a stretch in the back at the deltoids, and keeping the breathing going. And then continue the breathing as you're looking down into the well. And as you finish exhaling, gently come back up as you begin to inhale. And feeling a nice stretch in your back. And settling in for a lovely meditation. Now you can keep your eyes open or closed, however you feel comfortable. And we'll do this meditation called Ho'oponopono, which constitutes of 4 fundamental phrases. I love you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. And thank you. As you're taking in deep, comfortable breaths into your abdomen, notice the rise and collapse of the belly. Breathing nice and deep into your belly and exhaling what the body does not need. Now, as you're breathing in nice and deep and breathing out, repeat to yourself in your mind silently, I fill my world around me with light. I see nothing but pure white light surrounding me. Above me, below me, besides me, front and behind me, I see and feel this healing white light. I fill my world with love. I see nothing but the light of green, which is the shade of love surrounding me. Above me, below me, besides me, front and behind me, all I see is this light of love. Next, I fill my world with the life energy that gives me strength. I see nothing but the yellow glow of this life energy. Above me, below me, besides, front and behind, all I see is this energy of strength surrounding me. I love you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I am grateful for the situation in front of me. It has come for a reason. I accept with kindness this offering from my karma and destiny. I see the person in the situation with great respect. This person is a great teacher for me. In my mind, I share all the treasures of the divine gifts I'm blessed with this being. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I have the power within me to make shifts that I seek. I see the situation having the grace to change by itself. I give it the power of the light of the Supreme. With my pure intention, I have the power to manifest truth and abundance in my life. I will stay positive, happy, and light at all times. Positive, happy, and light. Let this image of yourself sink deep into your subconscious. I allow the light of the divine to infuse peace into all areas of my life. I allow the light of the divine to infuse peace into all areas of my life. I love you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. Say this to yourself as if you're looking into a mirror and talking to your younger version of yourself. I love you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. Notice how light you feel at this moment. Notice the freedom from gnawing thoughts in your mind. The ease of your breath. And the calmness in your entire being. And from this state of clarity, ask yourself this question: what is my definition of success? What is my definition of success? So whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes and you can go ahead and share in the chat the answer to this question. What is your definition of success? And as you're doing that, I also invite you to go ahead and think of questions that you want to ask me. And the chat will be where you share the comments. The Q&A window will be where you share the questions. So it's easy for me to go through the questions one by one as they come in. So this is very important, folks, for you to ask yourself. And I know here there are many parents as well who are responsible for maybe one or more kids. And there's some even grandparents here. And it's very important that you need to ask yourself this question before you ask or encourage your children or your grandchildren to be asking themselves this question. Because unfortunately, like I said before, none of our systems, none of our education entities are teaching us these skills on how to use our inner guidance tools, inner compass for us to navigate through some of the most important junctures of our life. So I'm hearing some responses here. So Linda is saying, looking in my eyes and know that I have done my best in peaceful, calming interactions with all that I have encountered. Fantastic. Okay, great. And so I have a question here while you all are coming up with comments. How would you spell the word for the meditation we did? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and type it here in the chat window. And it's Ho'oponopono. So here's how it goes. You know, like Hawaiian words, they have very little in terms of syllables, and they basically use the same syllables to do many different words. So anyway, here you go. Ho'oponopono. So that's how this Hawaiian word says. Okay, so I'm seeing some other comments come in here. Success to me means my practice, my sadhana. I lost many friends along the way because somewhere I stopped. I paused to introspect and love my journey. You know, that's interesting that you say that as you kind of stopped, paused, introspect, and then you ask yourself these deep questions, and then you found that your practice is what brings you success. And you have to understand that those definition of friends is something that's a very loaded thing, where a lot of times you don't even realize that we just go in this mad pursuit of acquiring friends, and not necessarily those people are the ones that are aligned with my journey, and those are the ones who are actually contributing, they're actually propelling me towards my destination. And so when you actually indeed start practicing what is the deepest thing that resonates with you, these superficial people, these acquaintances, these people that kind of jump onto your bandwagon, they will jump off because they get bored with your definition of your pursuit of success. And that's okay. So you imagine what it is that you're actually offloading some of this baggage that isn't really serving you. Or at least, let's put it this way, it isn't serving you in this particular phase of your journey. It may have at some point in the past. It may have some point maybe in the future. Who knows that? We don't know anything about the future. But at this point, as you are living to your truth, and you notice these so-called friends, quote unquote, are no longer with you, traveling this journey with you, that's okay. So this is one of the things about social media as well, because we are so bought into this idea today that success, our identity, our popularity, our sense of self-worth is defined by the number of people who are in our circle, whatever that may be, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc., and the number of likes that you get and the number of shares, comments, this, that, and the other. I tell you, folks, there's a lot of famous people out there. And I tell you, Jim Carrey is one of those people who's actually come out and spoken about it. And he says that, I truly wish that everybody becomes rich and famous, because then they will realize how little happiness is tied to those things. Okay, so let's see. I've got some more comments here. Oh, it was beautiful. Thank you. And then some Diksha is saying that I couldn't come up with my definition of success. And Diksha, that's completely okay, because this is something that's could be quite a foreign subject. Somebody taking you into a little meditation for 20 minutes or something like that, and then asking you this existential question is, what is your definition of success? It's okay if you didn't come up with one, but what is important is that you have at least embarked on this journey. Hopefully you have learned 1, 2, or 3 tools in this last 50 minutes that we've been talking about how you could find an answer to that question. And remember, this question that I've asked, you need to ask yourself, and you need to find an answer for yourself to this question, because it's your journey. Your best friend, even if you have a twin brother or sister, your neighbor, your boss definitely cannot find this for you. It's a question that you need to ask yourself, and you need to start answering for yourself. And I've always said, any of my questions that tend to be quite deep, and then you don't necessarily get straight to the answer on the first attempt. But remember, it is sitting with the question that's more important than getting to the answer. And as you keep asking yourself, that circle of that response becomes closer and closer. You hone in, you zero in on that. What is that perfect response? And what that is doing is, like I said about that rocket for that children that become our, that they're making that moonshot, they're course correcting. So yes, you may not get to the perfect answer on day one, but what you're doing is, as you embark on this journey, you're slowly changing the trajectory. You're course correcting as you're flying along your journey, and you hopefully will get to that thing that will bring you fulfillment. As you look back in life, as I said, as you're looking, staring at your ceiling, you say, you know what? I've done things to the best of my ability. I lived to my fullest. I've lived to my idea of what success is. Okay, so now I see a couple more responses here. I did my very best for the last 80 years, and that is good enough. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. Beautiful, Maureen. And remember, it's not just about saying this to others, but just looking back at your own self, as I did in the meditation, and saying this, speaking to yourself, because a lot of times the guilt is not about what other people think of me, but it's my own judgment of myself, my own harsh critique of myself, of the thing that my expectations, my goals, my imagination of what I should be, what I could be, and I keep this harsh regiment about myself. And then, you know what? I'm living in the prison of that old guilt, and I'm living in the prison of that burden of not being okay with who you are, right? So please take this time to talk to yourself. I love that, what you said, Maureen. Thank you. And so I see another comment. It's odd that my definition of success hasn't shifted for decades yet. I abandon it from time to time, and that's okay. That's okay, Kathy. It's okay to abandon your definition of success, because it's a form of freedom, right? You're liberating yourself from that thing that's drawing you, right? You're being pulled by a leash, and you're saying that's whatever that leash is that's propelling you to that definition of success that is pulling you forward. And sometimes it's okay to let it go, because like I said, if you don't take time to slow down, don't take time to unclutch yourself, you're not going to be able to realize what is it that is truly actually meaningful for you. And all of that life experience that has taught me as I was working towards those goals that I had when I was younger, less informed, less wise. Now it's a chance for me to review that and say, what have I learned from that? And it says, do I want to keep propelling myself to that direction? Maybe yes, maybe no, who knows? But it's important is for yourself to ask yourself that question. Great. So I have another question here. Where does this idea of success, money, status, material ownership, and accolades come from? Why does the fear and the need for security move us towards safe careers, ways of living, etc.? Because it's so known and accepted. How can one overcome this lifestyle in pursuit of a riskier yet more true path? Great question. So I need to do another full hour, maybe whole day to respond to your question. So think about this. There are two philosophies, like I've already mentioned this in the last 60 minutes, that there is this philosophy of that, there's the evolutionary concept, and then there is this thing that, there is this divine existence where, we just creationism versus evolution, right? So there are these two major schools of thought. So now it doesn't matter which school of thought you come from. There is this idea that we are creatures of survival of the fittest. We are creatures that need to protect ourselves. We need to hoard. We need to defend our territory. And if we don't keep learning, growing, becoming stronger, sharper, better, more wise, etc., Somewhere we're going to be ejected because something is going to be taken away. We're going to be deprived of resources, right? So there is that part of your brain that is actually propelling you towards this quote unquote, this definition of progress. Progress is something that your brain constantly seeks, that if you ever stop making progress, something is wrong. Something is detrimental is going to happen to you. There's the fear of something is going to come around the corner because you're not preparing yourself, you're not propelling yourself. So this is built into, like it or not, into the DNA of our evolutionary process, right? So with that comes the fear that the sense of okayness is not okay. So I often talk about this hierarchy of needs, Maslow hierarchy of needs, and then there is only my own hierarchy of needs. I wrote an article about it, and I should do a talk about that at some point. But it talks about this idea that there is, these foundational needs, the things about the food, shelter, clothing, and the human being, once when you acquire that, you want to hoard that. So we are a very unique species, that we want to have money in the bank, we want to have food in the refrigerator, we want to have a freezer outside in our garage, and then we want to have degrees that will hopefully serve us someday. We want to invest in kids that hopefully they will be like our insurance policy, life insurance, this insurance, that insurance, right? So there's that. So having the needs, and the second step is securing those needs. And the third step is then I want to go create relationships, right? And then the next step is there is this thing of I want to make a name in the community. I want to have accolades. I want to have recognition. And then the final step, according to Maslow, is that after you have done the me, I, me, myself, accumulation of all of these basic things, then I come to this point of, instead of just looking at me, I ask and say, what is my contribution to the we? What is my greater contribution? That's where the fifth level of that ladder of the hierarchy of needs, which is defined as transcendence. I look beyond myself and say, where is the greater good? What have I learned through all of these material pursuits? How can I put that in the service of mankind? So that's the ultimate sort of the pyramid as you escalate through life. And I oftentimes refer to this and say that not only are we traveling through this journey in this lifetime, but if you stay with me in this idea of the soul continue to exist beyond lifetime. Soul is energy. Energy is never destroyed. And so energy continues to live in different costumes across lifetimes. This lifetime is just about one chapter in this book, right? So in that journey, we are going through this evolutionary process of this 5 levels of the ladder that I just talked about. So sometimes some of the children, some of the kids are born into this with very little need for material pursuit to feel a sense of contentment. So where does that wisdom come from? That wisdom has come from their journey that they have embarked on, and they've been pursuing that for multiple lifetimes. And some of us, we also need to be reminded of this in this lifetime. So then maybe early on in our life, we pursue all the material possessions and the accumulation, like I mentioned, and the accolades and the recognition and so on and so forth. But then there comes a later point in one's lifetime when you realize that, all of that was okay, but that's not true happiness. So one of the answers to your question, whoever it says anonymous, I don't know who you are, it comes from experience. It comes from the wisdom that the material pursuit is not going to bring us happiness, which Jim Carrey has gone out and spoken about. The second is it comes from learning this wisdom, acquiring this from other people, looking at other people's journey and living vicariously and saying, you know what, I see this person. This is part of basically how my journey started off on this completely new trajectory. While I was in grad school at UT Austin, I realized that I was, on a full scholarship. I was a national champion sportsman, as I mentioned early on in this talk. And I got a job in my first summer in one of my dream companies. Life was already set. I was only 23. And I was saying to myself, if I go down this path and I look at those people who are vice president and presidents of organizations, I look at them carefully and closely, I say, is that the spark of happiness that I want to have in my life? I said, no, wait. There's something completely wrong about this trajectory. And I spent the next 30 years pursuing that. And I get to this place of these people that I'm seeing and saying so-called have arrived, succeeded, and say, no, I don't want to go down that road and say that I've lost 30 years of my life and then reach the point where I want us to kind of retract and recreate my journey. And that's when I got into this whole contemplative exercise of meditating with yourself. So the short answer, as you can see, it comes through experience or it comes from observation. Observation comes from either observing somebody else or observing oneself. And diving into accessing the wisdom of that compass that I was talking about earlier on. So therein will come that point where you realize for yourself what is your definition of success, and you let go of the clutches of the marketing machinery that we are all drowning in, right? If you don't ask yourself this question, there are machinery, there are voices that are speaking in your head right now that are willing to tell you what should be your definition of success. Folks, don't give in to that. That will be such a waste of life, where you have lived for somebody else's. You become like a cog in somebody else's machinery. You're working towards somebody else's yacht or helicopter, whatever that person's, intent of putting you through this grind. So please ask yourself this question while you still can, when you can still read out yourself. So therefore, you can live to your dream. And then, remember, whatever you do for yourself, you're leaving a blueprint for other people to follow. Those younger people, those children, those neighbors, those friends, those mentees, as you become a mentor for. So with that, we have run out of time. Thank you all for your comments, for all of your questions, for your active participation. Oh, by the way, I always get this question after the fact. People ask me, what is this background? This particular background is from one of the countries that I visited last year, Slovenia. And so I was driving across the countryside. As you know, I did this camper van tour through 13 countries of Eastern Europe. And so I went through Slovenia. And there was this spot that, as you can see here, random spot that I found so perfect that I had to stop and take a picture of it. And here I am sharing this with you. And if you ask me, where is it? I can't even probably tell you where it is, but I just tell you it's in the country of Slovenia, somewhere between those great lakes that they have there. So with that, I like to thank you all for your time. I appreciate your patience and participating. And until I see you all again, be well and be happy. Ho'oponopono.